Time for another trip to town.
Time to get working in the studio again.
This is kind of what happens. I go to town and Irene gets to play. Well,
if I was playing, I'd be working on a jigsaw puzzle or reading a book that was just for fun. No, I'm working.
She works a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Trips into town get to be kind of boring for people who are watching what I'm doing. This is kind of what happens 3 to 6 times a week. My time going into town depends primarily on when we have orders that need to go out and when we have things coming into the post office or to the market. We have no local delivery of mail or packages, so we have a limited number of places where we can pick things up. I don't want things to hang around for any length of time, especially this time of year when businesses have a lot of stuff coming in, both for their own business as well as for local people who are trying to pick things up. Our property is fully fenced with a cattle-proof or cattle-resistant fence. It meets Arizona law for fencing out cattle. That gives us a bunch of different benefits, and it gives us some additional rights. But it means one of us has to get out and open the gate, then we get to close it up and lock it up. Now I have a automatic opener. Unfortunately, the main board on it died. I have a replacement. It's just another thing on the list to get done. Time to get rolling. Well, the truck stop is getting ready to open. Just a matter of days now. This entire portion of the main road going to town was all messed around with. Well, I'm here at the post office. Time to go drop off these packages for Irene, check our mail. Then I'll be going down the road to the market. And the job there is to check for packages that are in their back storage area. This time of year, the packages come in hot and heavy. There's not a lot of space, and I don't want to be one of the larger packages causing problems. This is one face of change. Until several months ago, this was our mobile station. It was the gas station that we used for the entire 18 years that we've lived in the area. It burned. arson. It's all gone. It's scheduled to be replaced by a laundromat. Now the town does need a laundromat, but it's just sad to see this coming to an end. This is the face of transition. It's being forced on the town, for good or for worse. A brand new truck stop. It's open. The inside is nice. It's well stocked. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of concerns by people in town about what's going to happen as a result of this. Well, I can tell you, it's going to change. Things are going to change. It won't go back to being the sleepy little town that it once was. Now, it may actually be a small town, but it's going to have a lot of truck traffic come through here and a lot of people coming off the road during their vacations and travels.
1, 2, 3.
Well, friends, I just got home from Ash Fork. Got a big surprise, and you saw it, and that's the truck stop has opened.
Right. It was originally, I think, supposed to open October?
It was originally planned to be opened in October, then they thought maybe November, but it opened within the last few days. I haven't been in town for...
A couple of days.
Yeah, 3 days, I think, so
Yeah.
sometime in the last 3 days.
Right. It's about time. There used to be a big truck stop.
That was Ted's Bullpen, but it hadn't been open for at least 5 years when we moved here. And we moved here 18 years ago.
Right. Our understanding is the guy who owned it owned a chain of truck stops. Instead of the family being able to pull their act together and keep the truck stops open, they decided to fight amongst one another to see who got the most pennies.
Yeah,
And I can tell you who got the most pennies.
the lawyers.
The lawyers. The lawyers are always the people who win in a situation like that. So that truck stop had been a big part of this town for a long time. And they had all kinds of, I guess they must have had a shop there. They actually had like a store there. They had
a large restaurant. They had a large restaurant that was torn down
Right.
and rebuilt as Family Dollar.
Right.
So that's been...
All that stuff's been gone
for
forever.
years.
Ever.
But you know, this whole thing really brings into focus transitions in areas. And when you live in a small rural area like we do, small changes can make big transitions.
Well, this area is part of Route 66. So back in the 50s and 60s, this was a busy bee place. It had, you know, it confuses the tourists when they come in because Route 66 in our part of the country, at least, is 2 lanes in each direction.
And it's divided. So if you look at the town, you have businesses on the right-hand side. You have houses on the left-hand side going west. If you turn around and come the opposite direction,
The same sort of thing.
You have houses on the left-hand side. So it's the middle block of town.
Right.
And then businesses and houses off on the edges.
Right, and back when Route 66 was really a big thing, there was a beauty salon, there were hotels, there were all kinds of things here. And then when I-40 opened, like many towns along Route 66, it dried up and blew away.
Yeah, there's a few towns that haven't really blown away. Seligman has not blown away, but it's
still not what it was when Route 66 was big.
It's really, really downsized, and it's lost some of the charm that was there.
Well, they've tried
with the local roadside, attractions.
Right.
Ash Fork didn't do all that well.
No.
The town's primary claim to fame was as a flagstone supplier.
Right. Well, way a long time ago, there was a Harvey house here.
It got torn down in the mid-'70s because it was owned by the railroad company, and they wanted to minimize their tax bill.
Right.
So they
ripped everything down except for one storage building, which was gifted to the Historic Society. And they've kept that as a museum, and they have bits and pieces of Ash Fork history there. Fork's history is a huge roller coaster. Back when the Harvey houses and that whole system of travel, the Hollywood people would be going back and forth to New York and everything. The main form of travel back then was by train, and this was one of the major routes. And then when that all got shot, and they did away with the Harvey houses, they moved the main line north of town somewhere, and then there is still a line that goes through town, but it's a subsidiary line. They, did, like I say, ditched the Harvey house. Then we had the Route 66 stuff. That was great, and then that all fizzled out. Then we had a huge flagstone business here.
When we moved here, there were 7 quarries,
right,
open, thriving. They had good businesses. They hired a lot of people. An awful lot of them were Hispanics who had serious stoneworking skills.
Right. A lot of these people came from Mexico because there was good employment here. And they were using the same stone quarrying skills that they had from Mexico. We did know some white guys who worked in the quarries here and did fine. The pay was decent. It's dangerous work. It's dirty work. It's hard work. But you could be comfortable. And then all of a sudden, I don't know how many years ago now.
2008.
2008. Okay.
When the U.S. had the downturn of the economy,
right,
all of the construction pretty much stopped.
And that means the industry totally dried up. And we hadn't been into town for a couple of days, and I remember going into town, and I'm like, did they evacuate the town and forget to tell me? I mean, all the quarry workers for all the closed quarries, because they closed everything but, was it 2 or 3?
Two quarries remained open on a skeleton staff.
Right.
Every other quarry had
just
shut down.
Shut, just like on no notice. The people put all their stuff in their cars and they drove away and went someplace else. So all of the small apartment complexes that had been full of people, the houses, there was one house on one of the main streets there that always had, I don't know, a dozen male workers living there, and gone, closed. And so that was kind of the next downturn. Then, as there was one or two new quarries have come and kind of gone a couple of times, but we started to get a little bit of cleanup done. Like people who owned property in town cleaned up their stuff. Some of it I think was false hope, but the fact is we were getting a lot more bodies here. It was still cheap in comparison to, say, California or Ohio or a lot of other places. It was warm in comparison to some place like Ohio. And so we were getting an influx from all over the United States, really, because people wanted to move to Arizona. Some people wanted 4 seasons, which we do have. And this was cheap in comparison to some place like Prescott. I mean, Prescott's a lovely town, but it's a lot pricier than this is. Now, there's a lot more amenities too, but if you're just looking for a small place, you can get it a lot cheaper here than you can down there. Then we saw, like, that was kind of an upswing there. We really needed a new post office, and that has now been worked through. The new postmaster got his act together. The previous could have gotten us a post. He was lazy. So we should have that started in the next year. They have the plans, they have the property, it's been approved by the county, so that's just a matter of time. That'll be nice, because right now they are crammed. I don't even know if they have, I think there might still be a waiting list again.
There's a waiting list for post
office boxes. So that's a real problem, and they don't do general delivery here anymore, I don't think. So I don't know what you're going to do. I think you have to go someplace to another town to get your mail. Yeah. But they built a Family Dollar, and that perked up the town, because all of a sudden you could get not everything you need, but you could get, if you just needed a can of beans because you were making chili and you thought you had 5 cans and you only had 4 and you needed that 5th one, you could go into town and get it. When we have tourists and stuff, they buy there. A lot of times you cannot buy water at a reasonable price in the national parks, or if you're going into the national forest, there's no place to buy it. So people come there to buy flats of water, ice cream. I mean, just silly things that you don't want to have to transport a long distance.
Now, let's talk some about transitions, because both of us studied the effects and the situations of transitions, particularly when you have two different populations coming together. And there's always going to be some friction. Now, we've had friction in the past between the locals out here on the part of the ranch that we live on, and
people in town.
The rancher.
Yeah, but we have, when we first moved here, there was a division between the people who lived north of I-40 and the people who lived south of I-40. The people who lived north of I-40 for the first 10 miles or so had electricity. When you get far enough out, you can get to the point where there's no electricity. But most of the people up there had power. They didn't have any water. They had to have it delivered the same as us. But they thought they were kind of like better. And some of them had a real attitude. Some of them were perfectly fine. There were a whole bunch of people who apparently came here as retirees in the 60s that we met when we first moved here.
Yeah, they came in 4, 5, 6 families. And they bought land
contiguous to one another.
Cluster.
Yeah, so they'd have like a little enclave of all these families, and they were doing, their life there was pretty much the same as it had been wherever the heck they came from. So they were still doing their weekly potluck, and they were still doing their get-togethers for bingo, and they were still, so they brought their own culture with them. Well, the 60s is a little while ago. Most of those people are gone now. I've been to a couple of the estate sales. And there was a time frame when it got a little rough. When we first moved here, they were having trouble with meth in our part. There were meth cookers out here, and the locals just decided that was not acceptable and drove them out. And they moved north. They moved north of the road, which cracked us up because we're like, all of a sudden, these people who thought they were such hot patooties up there because they had electricity also had the meth cookers.
Transitions are always an interesting topic from my perspective, because you have this conflict that's going to happen. It's interesting because the biggest insult that I hear people throw around here is that go back to California, because their idea is that everybody who comes to town
that's a pain in the butt is from California.
And you know that's not true.
No.
You have people coming here from Ohio. You don't have many people coming from North Carolina, but you do have people from Virginia and New York and Pennsylvania.
Everywhere.
Oregon,
it's the same as
Washington.
any other place. They come here because, relatively speaking, it's inexpensive. It's warmer than where they came from, although it can be cold. Sometimes it's a second house, so they want this place for the winter, and then they go someplace greener for their summer that's cooler. So they go north somewhere. And, you know, so it's hysterical. We laugh at some of the foolishness. It's stereotyping, and stereotyping never works 100% of the time.
There's a lot of sociological text on cultural interchange along the margins of
society,
of society when it comes to transitioning between the inner city to a more gentrified part of the city. And this has happened all over the United States. There's no part of the country that's immune to it. You have programs in many, many cities that will sell a house to somebody who's willing to come in and repair it and live in it for at least 5, 6, 7 years, depending on the city, and it's theirs for $1.
Right, yeah, because they had, well, like the places that we used to drive through in St. Louis, beautiful brick brownstone buildings, totally empty when we first used to come through there 20 years ago. You know, half of them were burned out, or, you know, crack houses and all this kind of stuff. They cleaned up the place. The places, some of those neighborhoods are just gorgeous.
So one of the things that we'd suggest to you, if you're looking to move from where you live right now into a new area, it's best if you can go live in the area for a while. A while, maybe a year. Around here, that's tough because there's really not rentals available.
Very few.
If they are available, they're
you probably wouldn't want to live there.
They're maybe a little rough. But you want to get a feeling for where you're going to be living. We didn't plan this to be a full-time home. We planned this to be a base of operations for Irene's business and more travel that we were going to do. We've had to change some of those plans for a lot of reasons. And so we now mostly live here, but we still spend about 2 months out of the year on the road.
In small pieces.
So we drive and we go and we do some things. Not everybody can do that, and we're not doing as much as we would have liked, but we're still enjoying our life mostly. I can tell you one thing for sure, and I think Irene's going to agree with me on this. This is the beginning of big change for this town.
Well, I remember when they first were going for permitting, there was one person that was a business owner in town that was against it. And let me be blunt and say she has one of the worst reputations in the town as being a nasty human being.
When I filled up the car today, I paid 10 cents a gallon less than if I went across the street to the brand new truck stop with their low-ball prices. Their pump price was a nickel cheaper than the station that I went to, but
we get the local discount.
And that's a big deal.
Right.
So there's a lot of changes that's going to happen.
You know, we were, the quarries used to be the only source of employment in town, mostly. There were a couple small businesses, but those were mostly family run, and they were not going to hire anybody who wasn't a family member. They would rather use an incompetent family member rather than hire somebody who could do the job correctly.
And they did.
Which is why some of those no longer exist. They went out of business because they treated everybody who wasn't a family member like crap. So we went someplace else to buy it, spend our money. When they were bringing in the whole permitting issue, they did, you know, they asked local opinions, and 99% of us said, we have no place for the children to go. When I say that, I don't mean I want them hanging around the truck stop. I mean, there's no employment here. There's 2 truck stops coming in for sure, the one that just opened, and there's a TA that's supposed to come in at the other end. And they're talking about they're going to have truck repair there. So it's going to be a real full-service truck stop. So they'll have tire changing, and they'll have truck repair and probably a truck wash and all that kind of stuff, something like 3 or 4 convenience food places. They're talking about doing an apprenticeship program with the high school here so that kids who want to do mechanic stuff can start with them in high school, just like the kids when I was in high school who went to trade school for part of the day. Now they could have an automotive program that would be for real and let these kids basically earn their stripes while they're in high school and then walk into a job when they come out of high school. That means some of the kids can stay.
So that's a big change. There's going to be more change. We can't predict what's going to happen except that there's going to be more people coming in.
Yeah.
Prices are going to go up.
Yep.
There's going to be more controversy between people who are coming in who are new, who aren't used to living in a rural area.
Oh, I suspect we'll be rescuing a few more people during the winter and things like that because they won't be prepared.
So there's a lot of things that are going to happen like that. And what I would say to you is, before you jump, before you leap, remember if you're going to go across a canyon, you can't cross the canyon in a series of small leaps. If you're going to go across, you've got to make it one big leap. Just make sure that leap that you make is as informed as you can possibly do.
We could not have guessed that there would have been the controversies. We knew that if it was a town with a predominant religion, it could make it uncomfortable if you weren't part of that religious group. There were other things that we just couldn't have anticipated. If I were to be stepping back and reevaluating, I would try and find some information on the educational level of the locals. Because when we first moved here, that was a real problem. And that is still a source of controversy here. Some of the people we've talked with in the past have said they're careful when they go to town not to use big words because they'll think you're, trying to pull it over on them. But those are the old people. And those old people, to be blunt, are dying. And it's not because I want them to, but they've simply aged out. Thank goodness, because they were holding the place back. You can't stop change. You can try and mitigate it. You can try and make it better. You could things like that apprenticeship program. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than what we've got right now. Maybe it will allow some percentage of the high school kids to stay.
Time to say goodbye, Irene.
Yeah, I have more work to do tonight. So
somebody has to work.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But he's going to cook dinner, so, or I might cook dinner. We'll see. Anyway, so be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because obviously there's lots going around here. And right now, the one truck stop is just opened. The other one is still in the earth moving phase.
A lot of earth.
Oh man, it's huge. So it's acres and acres. Is it 37 acres?
No, it's 50 acres.
50 acres. Anyway, it's big. I saw the map. And they're terraforming the whole area, which means they have to water runoff that they have to deal with and everything. But yeah, so got to come back and see what happens, because I'm sure it's not going to be dull.
It's not dull already.
Nope. But so far it's not horrific. So our only horrific thing this summer was, Henry mentioned briefly, there was problems with a rancher out here, and he's gone. So the problems are gone. You know, we have open range here. The next thing we knew is he had sold the grazing rights, and somebody from Utah?
Yes.
Had bought them. And we got to meet the new rancher and his ranch manager and the ranch manager's wife, because the manager and his wife will be living down here. Total different attitude. You know, they don't want trouble. They want cooperation. And what they could see just in that brief meeting that we had was, we all have a phone number we can call now. So if somebody hit a cow, or there was a cow dying from something in the past, there was nobody we could contact. Now something can be done about that. If there's trouble with a bull, you can contact somebody. If there, anything. Gee, did you know you get some cows hiding out over here, and they didn't look like they'd be branded? That was the topic, one of the conversations. One of the guys was talking about, there's a little valley that's kind of tucked away, and there's 20 cows that are hiding out in there that haven't. So none of the new calves have been branded. So the rancher's looking for help, and I think he'll get it, because we just want to live in peace and quiet, and no helicopters. He likes to use cowboys and horses, which fits in beautifully out here. They're pretty quiet. So you got to come back and see what happens. So until next time, bye.
Hey, keep brainstorming.
Yeah, obviously we are making lists, lots of them.